Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Have you ever felt a deep sense of being alone, even when you are surrounded by people? It is a feeling many of us know. But what does it actually do to our minds, especially when it comes to tougher thoughts today? We're diving into a fascinating study from the Slovak Republic that explores loneliness, social isolation, and their connection to suicidal thoughts. This study, called the Disconnect Project, looked at a big group of adults in Slovakia to understand these important issues better. It's part of a larger effort to get more information from Central and Eastern Europe, where this kind of data can sometimes be harder to find. Think of it as a crucial piece in the global puzzle of why people sometimes struggle and what we can do to help. So, what is the big question here? Well, suicide is a major global health challenge, and understanding its roots is key to preventing it. Researchers know that things like our social connections play a big role, but they wanted to dig deeper into how two specific feelings, loneliness and social isolation, contribute to suicidal thoughts. And importantly, if loneliness is a unique predictor even when we consider other factors. They point out that while we know about general risk factors like age or life circumstances, the role of social and personal connections is super important. They even bring up the interpersonal theory of suicide, which suggests that feeling like a burden or not belonging can sadly lead to suicidal thoughts. And here is a crucial distinction they make. Loneliness is about how you feel about your connections, the subjective sense of missing out, social isolation. On the other hand, is about the objective lack of connections, like not having many people to talk to. Past research has hinted that loneliness might be a bigger player than just not having people around. Some studies have found lonely people are much more likely to have wishes to die, and that loneliness can be a stronger predictor than social isolation alone. It seems like the feeling of being disconnected can have a really deep cumulative effect on our well-being over time. Now, depression is a known factor linked to both loneliness and suicidal thoughts, which can make it tricky to figure out what is causing what. But the researchers here wanted to see if loneliness still popped up as a significant predictor even after accounting for depression. So, how did they do it? They gathered data from a really good sample of over 3,000 adults in Slovakia. This wasn't just any group of people. They made sure it represented the general adult population by carefully selecting participants based on things like age, sex, education, and where they live. They used face-to-face interviews, which is a pretty thorough way to collect information. To measure their key ideas, they used standard, well-tested tools. Suicidal ideation, meaning thoughts of being better off dead or hurting oneself, was gauged using a specific question from the Patient Health Questionnaire, often called the PHQ-9. They classified anyone who endorsed this item as having suicidal ideation. For loneliness, they used a short but effective scale, the UCLA Loneliness Scale, to see how often people felt left out or lacked companionship. For social isolation, they used the Lubin Social Network Scale to get a sense of the actual number of social contacts and support available. And depression was measured using the rest of the PHQ-9 items, excluding the suicidal ideation question to keep things separate and fair. They also collected information on a bunch of other factors that could influence suicidal thoughts, like age, sex, marital status, education level, employment, income, and whether someone was currently being treated for a mental health condition. Now for the really interesting part, the results. Out of all the participants, a significant number, about 14.6%, reported having suicidal thoughts in the 2 weeks before the survey. This is a pretty substantial figure, underscoring the importance of this issue in the general population. When they ran their analysis, they used the method called hierarchical logistic regression. Basically, they built up their model step by step, adding different factors to see what had the biggest impact on suicidal ideation. First, they found that having a treated mental health condition significantly increased the odds of suicidal ideation, which makes sense. But then, when they added depression to the mix, depression itself emerged as the strongest predictor. This is a powerful finding, highlighting how deeply depression is intertwined with suicidal thoughts. However, the story didn't end there. Even after accounting for depression and other factors, both social isolation and loneliness remain significant predictors. And here is the crucial point. Loneliness showed a stronger independent association with suicidal ideation than social isolation. This means that feeling lonely, that subjective experience of a lack of connection, is a powerful factor related to suicidal thoughts, even when we see that someone is depressed or doesn't have many social contacts. The OR of 2.93 tells us that people experiencing loneliness were almost 3 times more likely to report suicidal ideation, compared to those who weren't lonely, even after all other factors were considered. It is like loneliness adds its own unique risk. In their discussion, the researchers emphasized this key finding: loneliness. The feeling of being disconnected is a significant predictor of suicidal ideation that stands on its own, even beyond depression and objective social isolation. This is super important because it suggests that tackling the feeling of loneliness might be a crucial part of suicide prevention. They also acknowledge some limitations, which is good scientific practice. Because it is a cross-sectional study, they can't definitively say that loneliness causes suicidal ideation. It is like looking at a snapshot in time. Relationships, they are clear, but we can't see the whole movie of how things developed. Also, they used a single item to measure suicidal thoughts, which might not capture all the nuances. But overall, the message is clear and powerful. For the Slovak adult population, loneliness isn't just a sad feeling. It's a significant factor linked to suicidal ideation, potentially even more so than just not having many friends. So, what does this mean for us? It really highlights the importance of our subjective social well-being. It is not just about being around people, but about feeling connected, understood, and valued. This research suggests that fostering genuine connections and addressing the feeling of loneliness, perhaps through community programs or even just being more mindful of how others might be feeling, could be vital steps in protecting mental health and preventing suicide. Future research could look at long-term interventions that specifically target loneliness to see if they can reduce suicidal thoughts. This study gives us a valuable insight into the complex factors surrounding suicidal ideation. It reinforces that while depression is critical to address, the feeling of loneliness is a powerful and potentially addressable independent risk factor. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help. There are resources available and you don't have to go through this alone. Thank you for joining us on RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more science breakdowns. Well, see you next time.